Hailed as the cradle of the Syrian revolution, Daraa has been under attack. Tens of thousands have been looking for a way out as regime forces destroy the besieged city. But can a ceasefire help them escape before it's too late? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Daraa al Balad. Now, 10 years ago, Daraa's residents rose up against Bashar al Assad. Today, the city is home to some of the last opposition-held areas in Syria. But for how much longer? Well, people there tell us they are desperate, and the situation is dire.
We have been besieged in the Daraa al Balad district for more than 2 months. We're running out of food. There's no safe shelter here for civilians. Most of the houses are destroyed and damaged. We call on the international community and all Arab countries to help us to lift this siege. Most of the people here are unarmed. Every day we move to a new shelter because of the intensive bombing. There's not enough medicine in the area. We spend most of our day looking for some food for our children or necessary medicine for our patients.
Now, over the past few months, the Syrian regime, backed by pro-Iranian militias, have carried out a terrifying assault on the city. And the humanitarian situation is deteriorating by the day. So why is Daraa so significant? Well, apart from being the birthplace of the Syrian uprising, it was also part of a Russian-brokered peace deal in 2018. Now, some rebels handed over their weapons, and though the regime mostly took control, it also allowed some opposition forces to remain in the area. But today, Assad and his allies want them gone. On Sunday, at least 6 civilians were killed in regime bombings. 2 days later, dozens of rockets and shells tore through the Daraa al Balad district, causing catastrophic damage. Nowhere is safe, not even places of worship. Tens of thousands have been forced to flee over the past month, but thousands more have remained trapped, some of them sick and without access to the most basic necessities.
I'm from Daraa. I have typhoid fever. I have been looking for days for antipyretic or painkillers, but I couldn't find anything. Most of the pharmacies are closed and all the roads are blocked. My mother also suffers from high blood pressure and diabetes. We've been looking for days for a single pill of medicine, but we couldn't get anything.
Now, we are hearing reports that a Russian-backed ceasefire has come into effect, but the situation on the ground remains tense.
We are happy with this deal. It comes after a whole week of heavy shelling. The regime attacks have destroyed more than half the buildings in Daraa al Balad. We have accepted the deal to spare the lives of our young men and our properties. We are part of the Syrian state, but politically we are against the regime. We won't leave Syria. We hope the other parties will live up to their commitments to avoid the reoccurrence of such tragic events.
Human rights groups say what food and water is available now costs an extortionate amount. So what can be done to help the people in Daraa? Joining me now to discuss the situation there is former Turkish Armed Forces official Murat Aslan. He's now a researcher at the SETA Foundation in Ankara. Yakzan Shishakly is in Gaziantep. He runs one of Syria's largest IDP camps. He's also the co-founder of the Maram Foundation for Relief and Development. And from Washington, D.C. is former Syrian diplomat Bassam Barabandi. He's also the co-founder of the Syrian civil society group People Demand Change. Thanks all so much for being with me. First, let's try to establish why you think this is happening in spite of that 2018 agreement. And years now of what some at least describe as reconciliation. Why is this escalation and crisis raising its head now? Murat Aslan, go ahead.
Okay, I think the attitude of regime is to have a cleared geography at the south of Damascus. And Daraa has a symbolic importance because the revolution had started over there. The second issue, the reconciliation process, which was an outcome of Russian mediation, is a challenge to Iranian presence over there because Russians had kept promises had claimed promises to Israelis and the United States. Now we have a type of regime's attitude, Russian mediation efforts to gain more leverage, and Iranian quest to be more active in the region. And now we see humanitarian disaster, Andrea.
Okay. Bassam, do you see it along those same lines? I mean, is a lot of this actually, proxy related?
Yeah, actually, the question will be why now? Why it wasn't 2 months ago, 3 months ago? What's changed now? I believe that what's going on now is the Iranian new leadership, who are well known that they are extremely right-wing of any other administration in Iran. They just want to show the muscle. They want to project the power. And the easiest part, they think, is in Syria, especially in Daraa. Being there, they want to evacuate the city from all the Sunni inhabitants. They want to be close to border with Israel and Jordan. They want to send the exact message that we are here and we are strong. That's why now, rather than any other things. Definitely, I agree with Murat. The Russian are there, the Israeli are there, American are there, and that's why exactly the Iranian, now they are mobilizing their forces and the pro-Syrian regime militia, their own militia, in order to go to Daraa. Okay. Nothing has changed substantially, let's say, in the last 6 months. There's no movement, there's no military action against the regime, there's no civilian disobedience against the regime. Things were just fine, the basic fine. Iranian mobilized everything just again to send the message that we are here and we are strong.
Okay. So we have two panelists there citing that Iran is most likely the force behind this. Yakzan, are you on the same page? Because, Amnesty International, for example, cited one source in their report that said the siege is because of the area's political stance against the presidential election in May. Does that play a role, or do you think that might be an oversimplification, especially hearing what our last two panelists had to say?
Well, we need to know, before the siege, the area was not very well serviced by the regime. Even though they signed with the Russian, the agreements was to be serviced with the food and medical supply, and they did not get the right service. The Syrian Red Crescent did not do the delivery with their promises. So the area were under siege for a really long time, but now it just got more tense. Yes, the Iranians are there, the Russians are there, everybody's there, but I mean, the people are paying for that. I mean, we're talking about civilian with no any military activity. Where I mean, the numbers are huge. I mean, we all seen videos of the missiles where they're hitting not only mosques and houses and the civilian, and they also had the agreement, a few days ago, and people in there, they were like, wherever the regime wants. But again, the regime, after they agreed on stopping this shelling, and they started again.
Right. I mean, you're best placed to testify to this then, Yakzan, about telling us more about how bad it really is on the ground. We heard one resident there complaining of suffering from typhoid. Of course, we're hearing about food and water becoming, unaffordable now for many. Really, how bad is it compared to what you've seen in the region?
Well, it's so bad. I mean, we're talking again about the area, just like we're talking about 9 years war, and the area were not serviced. So it's not like the siege just happened and the people have some extra food in their houses. The house is already empty before. And we're talking about medical supply. We need medical evacuation. I was talking to somebody in there, just like an hour ago. I mean, they're missing everything. A woman needs just basic supply, water. Look, I mean, the picture is showing right now, medication, just like normal necessities. Of course, we're not talking about electricities, no schools, and no the other like normal life needs.
Right. I'm going to stay with you for a second because I need to ask you on the humanitarian front specifically what your real concerns are going forward. I mean, you described the situation as miserable, but I mean, how much will this suffering specifically be able to really matter to the international community at this point when we're seeing the number of crises that we're seeing globally, not least Afghanistan, which has only just kicked off? I mean, Syria has been out of the headlines now for quite some time, and the situation has not gotten better. So what really are your concerns going forward, and what can actually happen to the people of Daraa if they are not seen to by the international community?
You're totally right. Mr. Martin, the second Secretary General, was in Damascus a few days ago, and he's coming to Turkey, I think today in Ankara or tomorrow. So, I mean, they're doing all this at the time where the second Secretary General in the area was visiting Damascus. So basically, the international community are not stepping forward. They're not doing their duty. They're not protecting the civilians. I mean, as the civilians, they really can do nothing. It's a brutal regime. The war is there. We're talking about countries like Iran, are like it's big countries, and we're talking about civilians. Unless the international community move forward and guarantee any agreement between the civilian and the government of Damascus, we will get nowhere.
Okay.
The killing will continue.
Right. I mean, Murat, we're hearing now that Russia may be brokering or maybe has brokered some kind of further reconciliation deal. But I want to ask you the larger question and how much Daraa really matters to Russia. You were alluding to this because you think this is about Iranian interests. Russia obviously plays a very influential role in Syria, but how far is Russia willing to go for an area like Daraa if it means having to clash with Iran's new leadership and perhaps with Assad in order to appease the international community and the humanitarian issues that are at stake in Daraa?
Well, Russian strategy is really interesting because on the one hand, they are in a great competition with Iran from the very beginning. On the other hand, they are cooperating either individually or under Astana process. Well, the ultimate goal of the Russians is to stay in the Mediterranean Sea through a regime which is loyal to Russian interests. On the other hand, the regime is currently very loyal to Iranian demands at the south. So mediation has become one methodology for Russians, either to have all parties be dependent on them, and second thing, they are making use of the publics and the military units who are proceeding to a reconciliation process with the regime. Let me give you an example for that. They tried to conscript Syrians in the region to private military companies and sent them to different regions like Libya, like Armenia. So it's a win-win situation for Russia to be involved to the south of Syria. On the other hand, I don't think that Russians are not that much interested in humanitarian catastrophe, but just to have a political benefit, as they did in the rest of the region or in Syria.
Okay. Bassam, I'll let you pick up on that and tell us who you really think is most responsible for the misery now. And I mean, is Bashar al Assad really then at the mercy of Iran and its new leader, or is this kind of equally shared?
Look, in the last 10 years from the Syrian revolution, we can see very well that the international community, they don't care much about the humanitarian suffering of Syrian people. They always try to give aid, that's true, we appreciate it, but they never try to solve the cause of the reason why we have this crisis. As Yakzan talked about Daraa, even the situation, humanitarian situation is very bad, but nobody cares about it. That is not an issue to discuss within any levels. The whole issue is about, for regime and Iranian, they do this starvation, sieging campaign to evacuate the people or to push them to be evacuated. For them, the Daraa area geographically is on the border with Israel and Jordan. The Iranian, they want to be there. Militarily, they want to be there. They want to connect it to South Lebanon. You look at the map, it makes sense. And the only way to do this is just to push the people to leave by starvation, by sieging, by prohibiting them from any humanitarian aid. Unfortunately, the UN can do nothing because Daraa, after they closing the cross-border from Jordan, all the humanitarian aid should come from Damascus to Daraa. And Damascus is very selective who they give where and what. So they give their own people in the province of Daraa on numbers, on data papers. You can see the word Daraa, but you cannot verify who is in Daraa getting what. The bottom line for the Iranian, they just literally, they want to evacuate. We have something like 150,000 people there. They offer them to go to Idlib, some of them. The civilian, they want to Jordan. Jordan say, enough is enough, we cannot take any more khalas. Russian under pressure because they were the guarantee in 2018. They were the big boy in the room among the regime and the Iranian. And they were dealing with the Israeli, with Jordan, with the United States to say, we will save that area, we will save that deal. So today, the pressure on Russia that you have to deliver, otherwise, why you consider yourself as mediator or as whatever you want to say. So accordingly, I think if there will be literally some interest to help the people of Daraa from a humanitarian perspective, the pressure should be on Russia, not on the regime, not on EU. 100%, because they are there, and the UN can say, okay, we want to deliver the food with observation from Russia, not from the regime or Iranian. Whereas just to make statement, to say, UN, we need your help, the UN, they can hardly survive in Syria.
So if the pressure has to be on Russia, I was actually going to ask you, Yakzan, if there is any appeal that can be made on a humanitarian level directly to Iran to try and change this, or will the pressure really have to come from outside? And as Bassam was describing, going through Russia, the only approach that could possibly change the situation?
Pushing Russia, not going through Russia.
Okay, pushing Russia.
Well,
just to make things clear.
You have to go to the Damascus government, because even negotiation, bigger level, the Russian is a guarantee, the Russian who did the reconciliation with the people on the ground, but the Damascus government did not respect that. So UN agencies has to go for any delivery to Damascus government approval. Of course, the Russian will pressure the Damascus government where they have the higher say on this, but UN agencies in Damascus, they should push for that. And they've been, my understanding, asked to deliver to Daraa last year, and the Damascus government refused, even before what's happening, the recent escalation. So we need to push the international community to pressure the Russian, to pressure the Damascus government to deliver food to Daraa, to do medical evacuation, and also to the protection of the civilians who are trying to flee this shelling, because also some people are trying to leave the area and they were forbidden and blocked through checkpoints to leave.
Okay. Murat Aslan, I want you to expand, if you will, then on your bigger picture here, because if you see this as Iran's push to really achieve the goals it has, specifically in this area, tell us how you think Iran is envisioning its winning situation right now on the ground. What exactly does it want, and what will, remember, Israel and Saudi are going to factor into the equation as well. What will they have to allow them to gain before real confrontation starts?
I think the big picture is about the regional politics. And if there's something's happened in Daraa, I think Jordan, Israel, the United States, and indirectly Saudi Arabia will be included to the dynamics of a probable conflict, escalation, and anything else. And Iranian vision is to present themselves to the global public, but mainly the local one, as a stronger player, directly threatening Israel and challenging the United States. And Daraa, or south of Syria, is the proper and excellent place to execute such kind of vision. But what we can do against Iran, or how we can, encourage or push Russia to comply with the demands of international society, that's the critical question. The first option always are reminded as sanctifying the actors. Well, we have Caesar Act not working that much, but I think international solidarity must push the local actors, as they did in Libya, under the auspices of the UN. And unfortunately, UN is nonsense, because Geneva process is something stalled that we expect nothing. But an international solidarity must come through the United Nations. So there must be a refreshment of the UN initiative regarding Syria case.
Okay. I mean, you meant to say sanctioning the players involved, but let me ask Yakzan if just hearing that word scares you as well, because we all know that in many cases, with as good as the intentions for sanctions are, it's so often the civilian population that ends up suffering.
Absolutely, but also what the Americans and many other countries, they kept saying the sanction will not touch any medication, any food, any necessities to the civilians. So basically, the regime is taking advantage of the sanctions to cut the food on the besieged area and other areas on the people and the basic necessities. Those sanctions are not touching the basic necessities. So basically, it's the regime playing the political game that the sanctions are stopping the aid, but the aid will not be touched by the sanctions. And that's very clear. With every meeting we had with people like in New York and other capitals, they said sanctions will not touch the aid to the civilians.
Okay. Bassam Barabandi, let me ask you this. The last few years, some analysts were going as far as to say that the war was close to over because Bashar al Assad had taken back more or less control of the country. We saw the last few holdouts that we're still seeing what's there in Daraa. But in the end, especially with the complexity that the three of you are really highlighting today of what is still happening on the ground, the geopolitics involved, the proxy fighting involved, how far is this war from over?
Oh, I think we didn't start yet, the real war. Again, it's not about Syrian war anymore. It's not about the regime and the Syrian people anymore. In reality, if you look deep inside, it's about you have Iranian project that they want to go over the whole Arab countries. You have the Russian project that they want to say to the international community, look, we are projecting power from Syria, we are on the Mediterranean, we can control your life. You have a lot of things is much bigger than Syria that make the Syrian fight is very far to over. I think we are moving to phase 2, or phase 3, which is much more dangerous, which is Iranian-controlled Syria. Iranian now, they are using the Iraqi oil to supply the regime for daily need of its oil, and now they are doing the same for Lebanon, and they offer the same for Jordan, which means that day by day, the daily needs of a human being, regardless if you are pro or against, from electricity, from heater, from gas for the cars, it will be by Iran or from Iran. If the Iranians get that point, and they are very close to reach to that point, that means they are controlling militarily and economically and politically. This is the dangerous what's going on in Daraa, because it's not about Daraa again. Why now Daraa? It's about the pipeline, the Arab pipeline that come from Egypt to Jordan to Lebanon. To provide Lebanon to the oil and the gas, where the Iranians, they are offering the same thing for these two countries. So today we are moving for second step. Syria, unfortunately, is in the middle of everywhere geographically. We are close to Turkey. We have close border with Turkey, border with Iraq, border with Israel, Jordan, not far away from Saudi Arabia. So for Iran, Syria is something very important. And all Iranian leaders, they say, for different reasons, different occasions, that we will never allow Syria or Damascus to fall to the Syrian people. Even Lavrov, one time, he said, we will never allow the Sunni to take over Syria. Even Syria is Sunni, majority Sunni. But that he's sending this message to Iranians. And Lavrov was saying very openly. So the context of the fight today, even on the surface, is Assad vis-a-vis the people or Assad vis-a-vis the opposition. But we cannot ignore it's not anymore Syrian fight. Syrians are paying the price. Yakzan, who do his job just to try to keep the people alive. But this is not the issue.
Understood.
There's no shortage of the humanitarian aid.
I mean,
no way.
I have to say,
there's shortage. There's shortage of political will to solve that issue.
Gosh, I'd physically hurt when you said that you think the war is actually really just beginning. I understand. I want to ask Yakzan though for some final words. I mean, are you any more optimistic, or are you thinking on the same lines there as Bassam, that the real trouble may have just started?
Well, we cannot lose hope because it's the only thing we have, right? But so far, we've seen. I mean, we've not seen the right support we've been asking for the past 10 years of this war. We need more support from the international community to stop the war, to stop hurting the civilians, and actually to take the criminals to criminal courts.
Right. Murat, quick final words?
Yes, I think we forget something really important. It's Lebanon. Currently, Lebanon is boiling, and Iran will be eager to expand this warfare, maybe covering Lebanon, because there is a great strain because of the economic situation and ethnic and religious competition of the groups on the ground. So rather than discussing the end of the conflict in Syria, I think international community should focus on how to isolate it in Syria first, rather than having it in Lebanon. I think that's really important in the coming year.
Okay.
I think if you allow me the last thing.
Sure, 30 seconds,
Go ahead. Most of the people in the West, on the DC, they try to separate Syria from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Jordan, from Turkey. In reality, this is one area. You cannot separate the problem in Syria from Jordan, from Iraq, from Syria, from Turkey. It's one package. We are one people. The big major problem, I think, in dealing with the issue, they try to say Syria is khalas, it's by itself, we will deal with it. You cannot solve Syria problem without Lebanon, and you cannot help Jordan economy without solving Syria and Lebanon problem. You can stabilize Iraq, whereas PKK is in the northeast Syria. It's all connected.
Okay.
This is the issue. So I think we should move, if there will be seriousness to solve the problem in the whole region, there should be conference for the whole region to say how we solve all this problem as one package.
Okay.
We cannot say Iraq by itself and Jordan by itself and Lebanon. It's one people, one history, one land, and one problem.
Okay, Bassam Barabandi, we're going to have to end it there. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists, really, so much for being with us. Fantastic discussion. And of course, to our viewers for tuning in as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter @the_Newsmakers, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, The Newsmakers. I'm Andrea Sankey. I'll see you next time.